And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another special edition off-season episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host tonight, Jared Morris. Very, very excited to be with you and to be bringing this episode to you. This is an episode that I have wanted to do for a long time. Our whole team has, in fact, and so we're really, really excited that it is here. And before we begin, I just want to let you know this is the kind of episode where you really want to watch the video. Obviously, we record all these as Google Hangouts, and so we post the YouTube video on the podcast episode page. And a lot of times, unless you want to see Ryan's face, it's not really worth actually watching the video. But for this one, there's a big reason to watch the video because we're going to be going through a number of really interesting, compelling IU artifacts with the man behind the Twitter account IU Artifacts, Chris Williams. And so if you do have a chance to actually watch the video for this one, check it out. If you go to assemblycall.com/artifactshow, that's where you will actually be able to see the video. So just wanted to give you that heads up to enhance the viewing and listening experience of this episode. So with that said, we will bring in our guest here in just a second, Chris Williams. But before we do that, I do want to welcome in Andy Bottoms, my co-host tonight. Ryan unfortunately couldn't make it. He had to broker peace between the San Diego Chargers and Joey Bosa. And Will is actually right now in Chicago doing a tryout for the offensive line. That's how bad things are for the Bears. So neither Ryan nor Will could be here. But Andy, the Eagles are just looking peachy this season, so you have nothing to worry about. You're here.
I feel good. I've got an Eagles shirt on, and you can't pass up an opportunity to represent a team that may have the least skill position talent in the entire NFL.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's good to see you, man. It's good to be back. Obviously, I was on hiatus there for a little while, but it's good to be back in the saddle. And we're doing this show tonight. We will be back with regular episodes every other week, all the way up until the season. And you know what the schedule's like during the season, every game. So we're really looking forward to that. Alrighty, so with that said, I want to introduce our guest for tonight, who again I'm so excited is here. He is Chris Williams, who runs the IU Artifacts Twitter account, and his Twitter profile describes him as, quote, a proud IU alumnus sharing the history of IU sports through memorabilia, also delivering IU history content for the Assembly Call. And so we'll get to that second part here in a minute because we're extremely excited about this new development and this new content series on the site. But I want to start by getting to know Chris and kind of getting the story behind a Twitter account that is truly a treasure trove for IU basketball fans. So, Chris, welcome to the Assembly Call. It is awesome to have you on the show with us.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and you have an incredible background. For those who obviously are listening on the podcast, they can't see. And you did this for me here right when we got on before the show. Would you mind just letting us know what these images are behind you in your background? Because it's perfect.
So we have an exuberant, probably the most exuberant photo you'll ever see of Bob Knight, the black and white one up here. Sorry, my gesturing is probably not great. Obviously below that, or let me explain the Knight photo, that's Knight on the sideline, 1974 versus Purdue. And you just didn't see that kind of excitement in that way, pumping his fists up in the air like that too often. Much later in his career, so it's a great photo. And then
the other moment you think of, I guess, is the '89 game against Michigan when Edwards hit the shot and he's
the
going
Edwards shot.
Yeah,
that's one of the rarities, absolutely. Below that is the Smart shot, Keith Smart, '87 against the obviously the Orangemen. Up here on top is probably one of my favorite teams, the '91-'92 Hoosiers team signed. The Final Four team that unfortunately didn't make it all the way in Minneapolis, but still a great run. And then below there is probably one of my favorite players of all time, Calbert Cheaney. A great shot there driving against some game in Minnesota, I don't remember. But the quintessential to me is right above my balding, shiny head, and that's the All-Americans poster, which to me is a quintessential poster that anybody who's an IU basketball fan has to own, because the great thing about it is that those are all first-team All-American players for IU. So, and there have been plenty of other great second-team and third-team All-Americans, but those all in that picture were all first-team All-Americans. So it's a great poster to have.
So perhaps if it's reissued after this season with Thomas Bryant and the others who aren't on there yet, maybe folks will get a chance to get it.
Need to do it. There's too many people they've missed over the years, so we need to add it. So
before we dive into some items, because I know you brought some items and we're going to go through some of these, I I'd love to just get your story. I mean, how did you get to this point? How did you kind of become this, one of the most prolific Twitter historians of record, really, for IU athletics?
Well, everything about IU sports has kind of been ingrained with me since I was a kid. My great-grandparents had season basketball tickets since the 50s, so they were going to the games at the old field house and then Gladstein field house. My grandparents were huge IU fans. I have had so many people in my family attend and graduate from IU. And my grandfather actually, when they were about to open Assembly Hall, he got to go into the stadium and actually sit down where he wanted his seats. And they had those seats for over 35 years.
Wow.
So, so he, they were finishing, they're putting things up in Assembly Hall, and he walks in, and he was the burst star of Indiana University for many years. So I think that might have had something to do with the fact that he was able to get away with this. But he went in and actually got to sit down and choose his seat. And I remember how lucky I was growing up to be able to go to IU football and basketball games. And the history part of it, I've always kind of been passionate about history. I teach history in Bloomington, so it's kind of, my area that I enjoy talking about. But I remember going to games and keeping ticket stubs and keeping programs and being able to get things handed down to me over the years, and it's just something that I've been fortunate to kind of add to. And when I got out of college, I graduated from IU in 2006. I did a victory lap, but yeah, absolutely. You don't want to waste your time at IU, that's for sure. You got to savor it all up. But anyways, I really just kind of wanted to collect as much as I could about anything related to IU sports. Basketball is kind of the area that I like to focus on the most, but I do a lot with football. But I have stuff that covers so many of the other IU sports: track and field, swimming, wrestling, baseball. I just kind of became fascinated with it, and I've tried to find especially items that are older and tell the story about it, because the farther away we get from these time periods, the Dean era, the McCracken era, it's important that people know about that. It's important that people know, that even though the Knight years were treasured by so many people, we had 2 national championships before Knight even arrived in Bloomington, and we had a storied program with Everett Dean, as coach. So that's the kind of stuff that I like to tell, and I've tried to just find as much stuff as I can, and it's kind of an obsession, but I think it's a healthy obsession in a good way. So that's kind of where it comes from.
We certainly agree. It's a very healthy obsession. And
yes.
I want to mention something here, and Chris, I know you'll agree with this. Andy, you will too. For those of you listening and watching, if you take anything from this episode, it's save stuff. Like as we were preparing for this episode, I put together a few of the things I have, and I don't have much, but like these trading cards from the 92-93 season. And I started feeling these pangs of regret at everything that I let slip away from when I was, a kid back then. I didn't save my program from the IU Northwestern game. I didn't save all this stuff that I had and that I wish I had now. And so if you're, young and going to games right now, don't think that you won't want this stuff, because when you're older, you will. And if you're older and taking your kids to games, and your kids are 11, 12 years old, when they're 35, they may be longing for this stuff. So save it for them, because it's so much easier to just keep it when you have it, as opposed to obviously having to go out and find it. And so if you take anything from this episode and it reminds you maybe, next season to save that program, so that in 20 years when you're reminiscing on the careers of Thomas Bryant and OG Anunoby and all these guys, so you have that stuff. I definitely think that you'll appreciate that you did that. So we just wanted to kind of do that PSA so everybody maybe has that in their brain coming into the next season.
We're hoping to inspire generations of hoarders, I think, is what we're really trying to do. Only keep the IU stuff. But whatever else, you don't need it. But the IU stuff, hang on to.
Yeah.
Now, so Chris, you kind of talked about you'd always been interested in this, and probably were doing it like casually at a certain point. You categorized it more as an obsession now. Was there like a moment when you realized you'd kind of crossed over from, yeah, this is a cool hobby, to like, yeah, I'm super into this, and it really falls in the obsession category?
I think when I was willing to pay an extreme amount of money for something that I know that I would never see again, and I basically was saying to myself, I don't want somebody else to have that. It kind of sounds selfish, but I remember the first time I really said, okay, do I really want to spend this amount of money for something like this? that's when things really got serious. And after that, I've just been kind of, on a weekly basis, looking here and there and everywhere. And that, I never used to be like that. I just kind of said, well, I'll find it again, or, it's not that big a deal. But, it was when I was willing to pay top dollar for items. That's when it really kind of became serious.
So what was that item that you mentioned there that you felt like you just had to have? I'm sure there have been many over times. What was kind of that first one that you referred to?
Well, it was probably a Damon Bailey jersey. It was probably something that I knew that was never going to come back to me, and I knew that Bailey was, it's Damon Bailey. I mean, if you're an IU fan, he's, especially in the early 90s, he's one of the quintessential players. And when I knew I had a chance to get one of his jerseys, I was saying, well, there's no turning back now, because that was it for me, and then it's just kind of taken off from there. So.
Yeah, so we may get into this a little bit as we go through some of the items that you brought tonight, but you mentioned you kind of go out and look for these things. I mean, where are the typical places that you find these? I mean, obviously, I think places like eBay and things like that are ones that people might think of, but I'm sure there's some more obscure places that you have looked and found things over the course of time.
I have found things at garage sales, and I'm not one of those people that goes on a Saturday morning and goes to 30 garage sales in Bloomington. But, I might know somebody that says, hey, we have something and we're going to get rid of it. Would you like it? And, I'll be like, yeah. I usually don't turn down anything because I don't want things to be thrown away. But, I keep tabs on online auctions. You get the notifications if something comes up. But there's a fair amount of people that are mildly collecting IU stuff, and there's not as many passionate IU collectors as you think. The big schools, Notre Dame, Kentucky for basketball, but the football schools, Michigan, Alabama, those guys are just crazy. And there's so many of them that have so many good items. But for IU, you just have to kind of be in the right place in the right time, and you have to get to know people in different circles that have things or have been keeping things. And that's it's all over. There's really not one arena that you look in.
And speaking of items, we're going to get to some of these items that you've brought, and you didn't let us know ahead of time what you have, so I kind of feel like a kid on Christmas morning here, waiting to unwrap some gifts. And I know you did an episode actually of the Peaks podcast a couple of months back, I think, with Ken Bykoff. And one of the items that you talked about was a ticket stub that you had, and and that leads me in real quick to talking about our sponsor for this episode, which is SeatGeek. Once again, SeatGeek was with us last year, and they're going to be with us again this year on this year's season of the Assembly Call. We're really excited to have them. And, of course, buying tickets online for sports and concerts has been a confusing process for a long time. It's always been hard to find the best deal for that game or that show that you want to go to, and none of the older ticket sites really want to change that, at least not that I have seen. But SeatGeek is different, which is why I use them and why I know Andy uses them as well. And they've come along and created an amazing app and website that really does make life easier than ever before to buy and sell tickets. And I know I've mentioned a couple times that this summer, Heather and I went to a few baseball games. SeatGeek is where we went to get tickets, got great prices, and it really worked out well. And the reason for that is that everything about SeatGeek is designed to make life easier for sports and music fans. So they do all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. They do all the work, you save time and money, and they want to help you get the most bang for your buck. And that's why every ticket on SeatGeek is given a grade based on value. You'll immediately see any underpriced seats and be able to find the best deals that fit your budget. And here's the best part. Assembly Call listeners get a $20 rebate off their first SeatGeek purchase. So here's what you do to get your $20 rebate. Download the SeatGeek app, all right, on either Android or iPhone. They have an app. You can also do this at the website. But go to the Settings tab and click Add a Promo Code and enter the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, and SeatGeek will send you $20 after you've made your first ticket purchase. I used the promo code myself, worked like a charm. So we know that it works. So the promo code is Assembly, ASSEMBLY, and save money on your tickets at SeatGeek. Download the app, use the promo code, and you'll be all set. So with that said, Chris, let's dive into some items. And no real, whatever order you want to go in, for us, we just want to see these items. And actually, before we do that real quick, you're going to tell some of these stories, and you've been doing that on the site. For folks who haven't seen your blog post series yet, you started this. You've already done 2 editions of it. There's more to come. And you can find this actually at assemblycall.com/IU-artifacts is the archive page for all of these posts. And really our idea with this, Chris, and you can explain it a little bit more, is just, just like you post the pictures on Twitter, we're taking those pictures, putting them on the blog, and you're actually expounding on the story. It gives you more than 140 characters to kind of explore the studio space a little bit and tell the story about the item.
Yeah, I like to, as you said, Twitter, there's only so much you can say about something, and with this, that you can go in a little bit more detail and talk about, the importance of the era or the time period or that specific event, and make sure that any important individuals in IU history are singled out, because I've been focusing on things that are older. Both posts so far have been pre-1950, and so again, that's a forgotten era in a lot of people's minds, and it's important that we kind of revisit that.
Yeah, and our goal is to put all those posts together and turn it into a big kind of online museum of IU artifacts. It's going to be really, really cool. So with that said, so let's roll through some items. So what do you have first that you want to show us?
Okay, well, this right here, try to get the glare off my computer here, but this is a full ticket from a IU versus Earlham basketball game in 1915.
Wow.
Okay. And the significance of this is that this was played at the original Assembly Hall. And some people might not realize that there was an Assembly Hall before the Assembly Hall that everybody knows today. It was on IU's campus. It was, if you know where Owen Hall is on IU's campus, or the Memorial Union, it was right in that vicinity. There's a parking lot there, just to the east of Owen Hall, and that's where they had it was like a multi-purpose facility. So you would have basketball games, you would have musical events, you would have theater, you would have gatherings, political gatherings, and what this is significant. What's significant about this is that this is the only full ticket I've ever seen anywhere from a game there. I mean, there are no pictures that exist of any game there. There are no programs, unfortunately, that have been found, and this, they would play basketball at that facility from 1900 until they moved to the men's gym in 1917. And although their teams weren't very good there, it is something that represents that era that really a lot of people don't know about, and the fact that there was even a facility in that location. They just now, thankfully, the athletic department and the Iman's Association just put a marker there in the past year on that spot, because so many people would walk by there and not realize what had been there, because it had been a parking lot since, I think, the late 30s. So
yeah,
pretty significant. So.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier, that's the thing about IU basketball history is,
right.
And this is one of the things that we really want to start kind of commemorating and celebrating more on the Assembly Call, is how far back that history goes and how rich it is, as you said, well before Bob Knight, even well before Branch McCracken.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Everett Dean, who was the first All-American basketball player at IU, went on to win 2 Big Ten titles at IU before he left for Stanford, and actually coached Branch McCracken. So that lineage, that continuation of the programs is amazing, because Dean would coach McCracken, and then McCracken would replace Dean as coach. And it's that connection is pretty important to bring up. So.
By the way, we have our live chat going, and our buddy Gerb already has jokes. He says, now instead of scheduling Earlham, they schedule Savannah State. Ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, Earlham was not the powerhouse, but in all defense, they were also playing like the Indianapolis YMCA team. So it was really anybody who could play anybody at that time. So.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of switching around here. This is going to be a little bit more modern, and I try to take everything out of the plastic so there's no glares, so you guys aren't blinded by everything. But I want to see if you guys can figure out the significance of this. This is 1962 Indiana versus Minnesota program.
Can I raise my hand?
You may. Go for it.
Is that Jimmy Rail, 57 points?
56. But yes, you are correct. 56, yes. So this is the program of the first time that Jimmy Rail would score 56 points in a game. He would do it twice. He would do it in 1962 against Minnesota, and then he would go ahead and do it in 1963 against Michigan State. And at that time, until the 1960s, and then finally when Rick Mountain did it in 1970, that was the single game record for scoring in Big Ten. And he did it twice. And he did it without the three-point shot. Now, granted, I mean, the attempts that shot attempts were astronomical, but again, thinking back to an era without the three-point shot it's pretty incredible.
Will you hold it up one more time, too?
Yes,
Because there's an incredible piece of irony here where it says, I believe it says no smoking.
Yes.
Except, of course, Jimmy Rail himself was smoking.
Yes, absolutely.
So he did not heed that advice or that rule.
Yes. And, it's not as if Rail was a one-man show. They had, Tom Bolliard was on that team, who was a great player in his own right, averaging double figures. But the interesting thing about the early 60s is that's kind of where IU basketball takes a turn for the worse. And McCracken's last 5 years were not great. What happened with the 1960 season with IU football being on essentially the NCAA death penalty, it really affected IU basketball's ability to recruit because that stigma about being a school that cheated affected everybody in all sports, and it really affected McCracken's ability to get top quality talent. Now, don't get me wrong, he had some great players. He had the Van Arsdale brothers in the early 60s, and he would get some good talent, but they never put together the teams that you would expect at that time. So, anyways, yeah, I've never seen the program. I've seen it a couple times, but people know what they're looking for. I haven't been able to find one from the Michigan State game, but it's having this one's pretty significant. So.
Yeah.
All right. Probably my favorite item right now, and it's going to probably be pretty significant to a lot of people.
Wow.
Okay, so this is, obviously, that's Bill Garrett. This is a Bill Garrett signed photo. And it's the only photo I've ever seen of Bill Garrett in an IU uniform. He was a Harlem Globetrotter after he played for IU, so he signed a lot of stuff. Well, not a lot, but he signed some stuff as a Globetrotter. But you got to remember, this is a guy who died in 1974. He died of a heart attack very young. And this is significant because he also personalizes it to an IU football player. Now, Jack, can't figure out who the heck Jack is. I'd love to be able to. I've looked through the records and haven't been able to find who Jack is, but having that provenance would be significant. But this is the only signed Bill Garrett photo I've ever seen of him in an IU uniform. And it's one of those things that it's one of a kind. And when I was able to get it, I was just tickled because I'd never seen one, ever. And, Garrett's such an important part of the IU family because of his significance, essentially breaking the barrier in the Big Ten, the gentleman's agreement with the coaches. He's an important piece and that a lot of people don't realize still. There's a lot of people that don't know who Bill Garrett is. There's a lot of people don't realize he was an All-American playing 6'1" as a center. And that to me is pretty remarkable. So.
Yeah, when we did our top 50 greatest Hoosiers, I think
Right.
I have to go back and look. He was definitely in the top 30. I think he was in the top 25 somewhere, and that's based on what he did as a player. I think sometimes because of his significance, what he represented. I think you're right. I think sometimes people forget how great of a player he was too.
Right.
He wasn't a member of a championship team, but was still just a terrific player.
Well, and the thing that's amazing is the 3 years, because obviously prior to the 70s, you could only play 3 years. You can play as a freshman. He was the only African-American playing in the Big Ten. He didn't play against anyone else who was African-American. So there's a lot of stories, and if anybody's not read the book Getting Open, which is a book that was written about his experiences in his life at Shelbyville and obviously at IU and beyond, it's a pretty significant book that talks a lot about the things that he had to endure that most people just couldn't handle. And it was amazing the perseverance that he had as a player and as a person.
What's the name of that book? Getting Open?
It's called Getting Open. It's actually written by one of his high school teammates. It was published, I think, maybe about 10 years ago, but it's a great read. It's got a great action shot of, I don't have it nearby, but it has a great action shot of Garrett in transition in a game. But it's definitely worth a read. It's an eye-opening book. So.
Hey, Chris, we had a question in our chat from Brian. He's curious if you appraise these items often, or does it not matter to you the actual worth of them because of your passion?
I'm not a dealer. It's not, I've had several people approach me about wanting to buy something, and it's something I really don't consider. I mean, I have some friends that are in the IU collecting circle that we trade stuff. I mean, I have an idea what I think that they're worth, but I do it mainly just to keep it, keep for like insurance reasons and that kind of stuff. But it's not something that I appraise because I'm looking to unload. Because it's something that I want to keep in my family, and I have 2 sons, and even if they don't have an interest in it, it's going to go back to IU at some point. So it's important to me that I just kind of keep it intact, and it's ever growing. So I really don't look to do anything like that, really. So.
And let's say somebody has a piece or some stuff, and they want to know either how much it might be worth, or even if they kind of don't want it and they want it to go into the hands of someone who will take good care of it and not misplace their banner year at Indiana book, like some of us who will remain nameless. What would be the best way for someone to contact you? Because I know you said that you're open to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always willing to if people have questions about something or just curious about what something is, to contact me, and I don't ever want people to feel like I'm like, oh, and I'd like to buy that from you. I'm pretty easygoing about stuff, so I want to make sure that people get the information that they have. They can contact me on Twitter, or they can send me an email. It's gloryforoldiu@gmail.com, and I check it regularly, and I'm always open to helping people out to get more information about what they have.
Glory 4, is that the number 4 or written out 4?
Written out 4.
Okay, cool. Excellent. So we'll put that in the show notes too, if anybody's interested.
All right, let's get to some jersey action, because I think this is the part of my collection that I really go crazy for. So.
Ooh, Andy, you want to guess this one?
Well, there are a number of number 32s. I'm trying to figure out where the, based on where the IU is at the kind of at the part of the neck there.
I'll give you a hint. It's in the Nike era.
Oh yeah, it is the Nike era. That's right. Is that Kyle Hornsby, perhaps?
It is Kyle Hornsby.
Wow.
And
I was going to say Eric Anderson until that last part.
See, I would have said that initially.
Looking at the details.
The IU thing in the middle was not the Eric Anderson era, but it took me a minute. But
it's true. So one of the things that is missing is this is from 2001-2002. So this is from the Final Four, final game season. There was an American flag right here, and it's hard to see, but there was an outline for it, and what they did is they took off the American flag at the end of the season. I don't know why, because it would have been really cool to have it on there, and I can't find one that fits there, but that's beside the point. But this is, I think most people will say that Kyle Hornsby was one of the nicest guys to ever play at for IU basketball. Good old Southern boy, and this is, I've tried to, one of the goals I have is to kind of have a database of IU jerseys from different eras and different seasons, and this kind of represents the more recent era, but it's significant because they got to keep their road jerseys that season, because obviously during the tournament and obviously the game against Duke, they were wearing away jerseys for much of that tournament. But it's a pretty significant thing because Hornsby, you gotta love the guy. He was a great role player, had a great stroke. And it's something that when I had the opportunity to get it, I didn't even think twice about it, because I was a huge Hornsby fan, because that was my freshman year of college, was 2001 and 2, and so I was fortunate enough to have season tickets for the games and be a part of that season and go to Rupp Arena when we beat Duke. I was lucky enough to be there, so that season's obviously very much ingrained in my mind.
I was a junior in 2002. So you obviously weren't there to go down to Kirkwood after the Duke win, but were you there after we beat Kent State, after we made 15, 16 3-pointers?
I was.
And everybody went to Kirkwood?
Actually, this is a great story. My dad and I went down to Rupp Arena, and we were able to get tickets. We had season tickets, and we got lucky enough to be drawn in the lottery for tickets at Rupp Arena. And we go there, and my dad and I were like looking at each other like, man, the first half woes, and for the split second, and I still just think how crazy I was. Like, do we even want to stay for this? And I was like, what do you think? Come on, you got to get that out of your mind. And my dad, I think, he won't admit this, but he was probably more ready to go than I was. But we stayed, and I remember, I never forget this. We go out of Rupp Arena, and we are scrambling to find tickets because my mother and my sister, we wanted to make sure they could go. And we asked, I kid you not, 100 Duke fans, and nobody would sell us tickets. Nobody. It was like they were willing to throw away however much money we were willing to pay for tickets simply because they got beat. And the amazing thing about that atmosphere was everybody in that arena was rooting against Duke because the hometown crowd hates Duke as much as they hate IU. And we were lucky enough to get tickets, and we went back down for the weekend game. And I just remember the threes, rain and threes all day long. And, so I was fortunate enough to go to both of those games, and unfortunately did not get to go to Atlanta. But those two games and that season were it was magical in a lot of ways.
And for you youngsters out there who maybe don't remember that game, that is, I'm pretty sure, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Ken Palm rankings go back to 2002. That Duke team is the only team that was number one in offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency for the season. I mean, that was a historically great team that Indiana was down by 16, 17 points and came back and down 13 at halftime and then came back with some of the grittiest basketball, turning it over, 23 times, but just through grit and determination and Jared Odell basket cuts and A.J. Moye just doing A.J. Moye things, just amazing. And one other thing, again, for the youngsters, if you don't know Kyle Hornsby, very similar player to Nick Zeisloft, played kind of a similar role, three-point marksman, played tough physical defense, although not obviously a great athlete, but kind of a similar guy to Zeisloft from last year's team.
Great flat top, too.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see here. All right, I think this will kind of blow your mind here. All right, so I'm trying to get all of it in here. This is a sign from the locker room in Assembly Hall. How I was able to get it is it's pretty crazy, but I was able to acquire it a few years ago. But this is from the 1973-74 season, and Coach Knight was also always about motivational messages in the locker room. I'm good friends with Bob Hamill, and he told me that's what Coach did. He was all about the inspiration, and if you've ever seen photos inside the locker room, they're everywhere. This is a hand-painted metal sign, and the message was to challenge the team to repeat as Big Ten champs. Because if you can tell from the information, Ohio State goes 1-2, Minnesota goes 1-2 back-to-back years, and then the 73 team, which was kind of that surprise team that went all the way to the Final Four, would win, and 74 would repeat as Big Ten champs. And it's one of those the things that you got to really look at it. I mean, to hold it, to appreciate it, but it's hand painted, and it just looks really cool displayed. And to have something that is something that's from that era is pretty remarkable because this was something that Scott May looked at all the time, and Quinn Buckner looked at all the time, and it's just something that still astounds me. So
I love that, and I love the note. Each team also had a veteran returning. That's great.
He was all about challenging them to, the best thing he says is the team that is victorious is the one that makes the fewest mistakes. That was a classic Coach Knight line, and it's not surprising that he was going to do everything he could to make sure the team, repeated. And obviously that run in the mid-'70s was, just a roller coaster ride over everybody else. So.
Gerb in the chat adds that Major League Baseball Hall of Famer Dave Winfield was on the 72 Minnesota team that won the Big Ten. And we got a question from Megan. She wanted to know, where was it here? It's from Mark. What's a piece that you've been looking for or chasing that you hope to get someday? Is there anything that's just like your holy grail that you're out there looking for?
I got two things, really. One of the things that I probably will never find is a jersey from the era of the 20s and 30s. I would always love to find a jersey from the era that Branch McCracken was a player. I would not want his jersey. I wouldn't feel right owning his jersey. I would instantly, if I ever discover it, give it to IU or give it to his family. But I would love the vintage, thick wool, material that would have been brutal to wear, but it has that vintage look and it has that style. That would be something that would be, I don't think is ever going to be found unless somebody's been passing it down through a family. In a more realistic term, one of the things I try to do is try to collect things that have a connection to an historic achievement or a moment. And I've been able to get the programs from the first game of Everett Dean's coaching career, Bob Knight's coaching career, Lou Watson's coaching career, Mike Davis, that other guy who was after Mike Davis, and obviously Tom Crean. But I don't have Branch McCracken's first program, which would have been during the 38-39 season. I've never seen one. I have a schedule from that season, but that would kind of, I don't expect to find anything before Dean. That's next to impossible. But finding that I would be overjoyed, and it would probably be something that would be a significant addition. But there might be some other things, but that right now is what I've been looking for many, many years. I've just never been able to find it.
Yeah, it's like
the Ivan question, though.
It's like the Ivan Renko jersey.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of Dean's first program, I wanted to show you this. This is a 1924 Indiana versus State Normal, which was what they used to call Indiana State University. And this is Everett Dean's first game as coach. And to me, the significance of this, obviously, I think it's cool because it says basketball at the top.
Yeah.
Is that this is really, in many ways, the beginning of the IU basketball era. They had some good players and some good teams before that, before this era, but they weren't great. They didn't have any Big Ten titles until Dean arrived. The style of play changed when Dean arrived. The quality of players changed when Dean arrived. And that building block, the foundation that he created, was continued on, obviously, by Branch McCracken and the wonderful tenure that he had at IU. So to me, this kind of starts it all. The importance of it being from that era. It's the oldest basketball program I have. It's the only oldest one I've been able to find. But the connection with Dean, and when I was able I saw it. It was an eBay listing, and I thought about it, and then when I figured out it was Dean's first game, I jumped all over it. I was willing to pay a significant amount to get it, and I've never seen another one like it. So, and that's, finding unique things, finding one of a kind items is something that's a real rush for a collector.
Yeah, well, that's great. And by the way, on our 50 greatest Hoosiers list, Everett Dean was 15th, Branch McCracken 11th, and that's taking into account their playing careers. What
Sure.
they did as players, both just incredible.
Jeremy Gray, when I was posting some stuff about Dean a while back, Jeremy Gray, I can't take credit to this. He was the one that pointed it out to me. He explained to me and informed me that Everett Dean was originally inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame as a player, not as a coach.
Wow.
Because he basically created the post position, the center position. He changed it. He revolutionized it. And that's something that really is unknown about, Branch McCracken, that he was such a quality player in addition to being a quality coach. And I always found that fascinating. And I had no idea about it. And Jeremy's as much of a wealth of knowledge as anybody about IU sports, and especially IU basketball. That was a tidbit that was really mind-blowing to me about him.
Yeah. Oh, Jeremy Gray is great. When we went up for the IU Minnesota game last year for our annual trip up to Bloomington, he gave us a tour of Cook Hall, and just his depth of knowledge of all IU sports is remarkable.
Yeah, he's a wealth of knowledge and something where you can throw stuff at him, and if you don't know it, he does, absolutely.
Yeah.
So more to the early '90s era, because that's when I really began to become.
Now you're in our wheelhouse.
All right. Don't worry, this is not Luke Recker. I wouldn't do that to you guys.
No, I know this one.
Yeah. Who is it?
Andy, do you want to give it a try?
No, you're good. I know who it is as well. I'll let you take this one.
I'm going Lyndon Jones.
You are correct.
Yes.
Yep. Pride of Marion.
Yes.
This is from his senior year, 90-91. The reason why is the patch, because IU's longtime athletic director, Ralph Floyd, passed away that year, and Floyd was a huge supporter of Knight, and Knight was a great friend to Floyd, and he wanted to be, and Knight was never one to do anything to the jerseys. Keep them as clean and straightforward and plain as possible. And he added this in remembrance of the longtime athletic director. And, I love Lyndon Jones. He was probably the first guy I can recall going to games and really rooting for. I think a lot of people, I saw a Bleacher Report article a couple weeks ago I revisited that talked about him being one of the most disappointing players at IU, which I don't agree with necessarily. I think a lot of people put that on the fact that he was called Mr. Basketball with Jay Edwards. But the guy had a solid career. He was a 4-year player. He started a lot as a sophomore. And I think that's a little bit of a bad rap on him. But I think he's one of those guys that in Knight's system, when they play team-oriented basketball and it's a motion offense, you're not going to have the great flashy guys. You're going to have the role players that do their job and play well, and people remember it. And Jones is one of the guys I remember about that. He's one of the first memories I have about going to IU basketball games. So
yeah, the 80s Marion teams, unbelievable with the two of them. A couple notes on what you just said. Number one, it's so interesting going back through IU history and seeing where great players overlap and where they might have overlapped if they had stayed. I mean, if Jay Edwards had stayed at Indiana for those final 2 years, he's playing with Calbert Cheaney for a couple of years. How the hell do you defend Indiana with Calbert Cheaney and Jay Edwards?
Yeah, his shooting. I mean, I vaguely remember Jay Edwards, but from talking with my uncles and my parents went to games, his stroke was as good as anybody we've ever had. I mean, it was as pure as can be. And I think that conversation that he had with Knight about deciding to bolt to the NBA after his sophomore year, I just had to have been a very tough conversation because of the what ifs. And I think about George McGinnis. I mean, what Knight could have done with him and Downing and Joby Wright and John Ritter and those guys in the early 70s. I mean, granted, he was a one-man machine. He averaged a double-double that one season. He was, 29.9 points a game. But you always wonder what would have happened. Now, granted, he could have been alienated by Knight, but he could have fit in the system perfectly, and they could have done big-time damage in those early 70s. So. Yeah.
And it's also, I think Ralph Floyd's name is an important one to bring up too. I mean, there was a real golden era of IU sports under Ralph Floyd. I mean, that was the football team under Bill Mallory was really good in the late 80s. I mean, for IU standards, going to bowl games, obviously, sure. Indiana's basketball team was great. And I think the IU athletic department really lost something when it lost Ralph, because he, had obviously presided over some great growth, not just on those programs, but also Jerry Yeagley and the soccer program too. And, so that was a big loss for IU sports.
Right. This is probably one of the coolest IU basketball schedules ever. And
oh man.
Yeah. This is the championship year, 52-53, and it's a double-sided. It has the same thing on the other side, but it has the profiles of so many of these great players. I mean, obviously you have Bobby Leonard, you have Don Schlunt, you have Charlie Kroc, you have Dick Farley. Burke Scott's not on there. He was the other catalyst on that team. It's just a unique piece, and it's rare. It is very rare. The only ones I've ever seen, I've seen one other in private hands, and the only one I've ever seen is the one that Burke Scott has at his little museum in his hometown. So that's only 3. And you would think something like this would be more common, but I've never seen another one. And I love this era because they were so close to winning back-to-back. That 53-54 team, nobody, Jim Shuley graduated. He was the lone one of the key seniors on the 53 team. He was a reserve player, but the starting 5 was there. And I've talked to Bob Hamill about this because the guy knows he is the quintessential IU sports history guy, without a doubt. It's all about the fact that trying to repeat is extremely difficult. Winning back-to-back is impossible. And they just ran into a really good Notre Dame team that season. But they were, they ran through the Big Ten like they did the year before. Schlunt was, here's another thing to relate to that. This is a press pass from 1954 versus Ohio State, in which Schlunt at that time set the single-game scoring record with 47 points. I mean, they just drove through drove through teams like they were nothing because they were experienced. But it just came down to it was difficult to win back-to-back. it was going to be a difficult task.
The 54 team, they won the Big Ten and made the tournament and then lost in the tournament?
They lost, and the tournament was reduced. I think it was still an 8-team tournament at that time, but the thing was you had to win your conference title to go to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Because there have been so many good IU teams that, I always think about the 59-60 team. Okay.
Yep.
59-60 team starts out 1-1, reels off 7 straight victories, loses their first 3 Big Ten games by a combined 8 points, and then wins the last 11 games of the conference, including beating the crap out of Ohio State, the team that won the title that year by 15 points at home. So they lost their 4 games by a combined 11 points that season. And obviously, they were led by Bellamy. Bellamy was the man that year. He averaged a double-double, but they had a lot of good they had Frank Radovich on that team. They had a lot of good players, 4 guys in double figures. But that's another team that I truly believe, and a lot of other people I've talked to agree, if they had gotten in the tournament, they would have beaten Ohio State.
Yeah, you talk to people like Bill Murphy who think that team, the way they were playing at the end of the season, was playing as well as any IU team has played. I mean, as good as any IU team on the run they were on at the end of that year. Right.
I mean, to reel off 11 straight and then, like what they did to Ohio State is just remarkable. I mean, it's incredible. And again, that's one of those teams. And I've kind of infatuated with the Bellamy years because unfortunately I was never able to, really be a part of it. Not part of it, but be able to watch it or any of those games. Going back in history and seeing the type of players that they had was amazing. It was amazing.
By the way, you've inspired Megan in our chat. She said she's now keeping every damn one of those pocket schedules that ever comes out.
Hey, and I'm telling you, even the ones from the last few years are hard to find. Find the one with what's the guy that transferred to Marquette, the big man?
Luke Fisher.
Yeah, that 13-14 schedule is like non-existent. Because half the guys aren't even on the team anymore. So, anyways.
Hey, and we did have a question too. From Natural Hoosier in our chat. You have IU football stuff. I mean, you have lots of different different artifacts, not just basketball, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of IU football stuff, a lot of older IU football stuff. I have the stuff that the late 80s schedules and the ticket stubs, but the majority of my major collection of IU football is older, pre-50 probably. So a lot of IU football. I have a lot of IU baseball. And sprinkled in with track and field and swimming, because I think our track and field teams were phenomenal for many years, and obviously swimming, you can't top swimming, especially in the 60s.
Yeah, one quick follow-up on the football thing. I was going to ask you this. You touched on what Jared and I would say is our wheelhouse from an IU basketball perspective in the early 90s. I think we both have, obviously for different reasons, fond memories of the football teams in the Mallory era. Anything cool that you have from those that Jared and I might geek out about as well?
Oh man, not nearby. I thought about grabbing some stuff and then I couldn't remember. Obviously you've seen the basketball that I posted, the football I posted that has your father, his signature on there. Which I couldn't get the connection right away, and then I looked at the media and I was like, oh my dog, son Jared, I was like, very interesting. So, I don't have anything that would be a wow factor, honestly, from that time. I don't have any jerseys from that late 80s period or early 90s period. So, yeah.
Man, what would be incredible? They used to have a little graveyard out by the practice field where they would bury like Buckeyes if they would beat Ohio State, but for big wins, and I think it was especially road wins. And I wonder whatever happened to those. They had little gravestones that were there. Something like that would be so great to find.
I have a friend.
The darkest day in Ohio State football history, perhaps something from that.
Yeah. Actually, Bill Mallory had that newspaper article framed, hanging up near his office in the hallway going into his office.
Yeah. I have a friend who has a connection. I should ask him because it would be neat if they kept those, even if they're not there anymore, if they kept them somewhere with their stuff would be great.
Hey, by the way, we might have breaking news here on Twitter. I don't know if you checked this, Chris, but someone just tweeted us, and it looks like they have a picture of the Michigan State IU program, the other one where Jimmy Rail put up 56 points. from 1963.
Yeah. I need to check that out because, I mean, I've seen it. Oh, yes. Well, I can tell you that that Spartan Antiques, yeah, that's the guy I talk with. That's actually, I don't know if that's it or not. I think it might have been the home game.
Oh, really?
I think it was the home game because that's at Michigan State. I'm looking at it now, but you can see there's rail on the right. I'll have to check that out because I'm almost positive it's it would be at Gladstein, the field house adjacent to Assembly Hall. But I got to double check. But that's a cool program. He's got a lot of great stuff too to follow.
Hey, another quick question for you.
Sure.
This comes from the chat. Gerb says he has a question about 1976 in books. Doesn't have it with him, but there's a book he believes came out in '77 that has a bunch of photos, box scores, stories of each game, kind of like the Banner Yearbook that I was talking about for '93.
I think he's referring to The Perfect Season. It's by Ray Marquette. They came out with a book. He was the guy. He was a sports writer, and he did a really great overview of IU basketball history. It was really the greatest one that came out until Jason Heiner did his in the early 2000s, which that's a book everybody has to own, by the way, that encyclopedia. But I think he's looking for what's called The Perfect Season, if I'm not mistaken. It kind of went game by game. And honestly, there are so many great books that were written that year, obviously because of the fact NCAA championship, but also 32-0. So I'm almost guessing that's it.
Is that worth anything? Like, is that where there are
it's not easy to find. I would say it's probably a $30 book. It's a hardback. It's not a hard book. It's not an easy book to find, but it's something that if somebody has, they should keep. I mean, it's definitely a book that is important because it's not being printed anymore, obviously.
Yeah.
All right, this is kind of a unique one, and you won't get the player, but it's going to be hard to see, but this is kind of like the oddest IU basketball jersey ever because it has dark blue trim on the outside of the letters and the numbers.
Yeah.
It's very hard to see, and it's very faint. I mean, I can't get a great shot of it, but this is a guy named, I can't even think of the guy's name at the time. He wasn't a star player, but the significance of this is that this was the Watson era. Watson kind of changed things up with uniforms and went to a different style, and they had this weird blue trim on it, which I can't even fathom why it's there. I mean, you can kind of see it there, but it's like this dark indigo blue. But this is the only jersey that I've ever found from this era. I'm guessing they were tossed. I don't know how this one got out, but this era, you just don't see this type of jersey, and it's just unique because of that color. It just doesn't fit as a cream and crimson or a red and white, whatever your tradition is on color schemes. But with the blue, it just kind of it's a weird color combination. So
yeah. Now, did you say you have some stuff from some of the recent teams?
I do. Well, I had, I showed you the Hornsby jersey. That's the most recent. One of the others that I had that I don't have with me right now is I have a DJ White jersey.
Oh, nice.
From 2006 and 2007. I posted it on Twitter, and I will post it after tonight so that people can see it again. It was from I wish it was from his Big Ten Player of the Year season, but it was from his junior year.
Underrated player.
Yes. So, and what's amazing is that these are things that from time to time are sold through IU. A lot of these jerseys I've been able to get through surplus sales. They had a huge one about 15 years ago out at the Mellencamp Pavilion, which they basically sold a major portion of stuff that they had collected over the last 40 years. And it was one of those things where if you knew what you were looking for, you could get something. I have a buddy who was able to get a Kent Benson jersey from that sale, which it's mind-blowing to me. Now, the good thing is I'm pretty sure the university still has kept the jerseys related to the 76 season. Because what's interesting is Knight was not keen on letting players keep their jerseys. It was something that he never really was okay with. It was one of those things where he felt that they needed to stay with the university, and he felt that the accomplishment itself was noteworthy. So.
Anything else you want to get to? This has been great. I mean, I could do this all night.
Let me grab something. I got to grab it real quick. I know this is weird, but let me grab it. Hold on just a second.
No, go to it. Andy and I can vamp for a few seconds. Great quote from Brian here in the chat. How can I pay college tuition for two kids after watching the show and these links being shared for great books?
Sorry for the dead air. All right.
Oh, man.
So, okay. This is from 1987. This is a Steve Alford Chevy Player of the Game Award. And the significance of it is this is from the tournament. This is when they played Auburn. This is one of the earlier games in that season, or in that postseason. But,
yeah, that was like that was a second round game, wasn't it? I think.
Yes, it was. But these were issued out as an award for, obviously, and we've all heard the player of the game things. But this was unique because I don't have much with Alford from Alford's era, unfortunately. I'd love to get a hold of the jersey one day, but I don't know if that's going to happen. But having something this significant that ties him directly to a very noteworthy accomplishment during a championship season is pretty important. And it's something that I actually have one of these, and I have one for Randy Whitman as well from the early 80s.
Those are awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I feel like, did they used to display those from like the prior season somewhere in the lobby of Assembly Hall? I seem to recall like seeing those somewhere along the way. They had
some of them, and then the story I was told is that they were thrown in the trash.
Oh, geez.
Or they were relocated, and then they just got rid of them. Because, I mean, they're nice, but it really depends on if you're gonna put that or you're gonna put a championship season trophy or a Big Ten championship season trophy. But I remember Bob and I used to do commercial spots or talk about eras in IU basketball, and that was the backdrop. I know what you're talking about, Andy.
Now, Andy and I would like to share something that we have. We have very modest collections of Indiana artifacts, but we do have one shared piece, which is the epic starting lineup figure of Calvert Chaney from 1994. Andy has his out. He plays with his. I keep mine.
I mean, hey, what are you gonna do? They're action figures, so it's totally cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did actually have one other thing that I got. I have a great aunt who lives in Richmond, Indiana, and there's an antique mall I think it's in Centerville that's not too far from there, that she'll find stuff for me, a lot of red stuff, but some IU stuff occasionally. And I'll show this, but part of it is just to ask, like, if there's anything really obscure that you've seen, just like IU memorabilia that's kind of strange. So this is came out after the '87 championship, and it's a pocket knife.
Whoa. Which
has on the blades of the knife, like, one of them just says Indiana Hoosiers and has the logo. The other one has National Champions 5 times and like the years on it. And I just, like, she got me this, and I was like, I don't even know why this would exist, but I think it's kind of cool. So I'm assuming you have seen similar items that are kind of like using weird things to commemorate IU accomplishments. So I'm sure you've got at least one or two good ones. Not that you have to show, but maybe you can kind of talk about that you've seen.
I wish I had. There's two things. First of all, when in the '76 championship, after that championship, they did everything. They added everything IU national championship. There was tons of stuff. We've all probably seen that Coca-Cola tray that has Bob Knight and all those guys painted on it. They made like a million.
Got it.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not a rarity. They made a million of those. The best thing I've ever seen is a seat cushion. It's an inflatable seat cushion, and it has a picture of every one of the players on it. And it just feels, it's one of those things where, you're just going to air it up, and then you're going to sit on top of the play. I don't know. It's just weird, but that's probably the most obscure thing, because they advertised it on everything because it was marketable. I mean, that was, in a championship team, especially a team that goes undefeated, you're going to be able to market them. And I've seen that. I've seen banks. I've seen IU National Championship pocket protectors. I mean, checkbook covers. I mean, everything you could possibly imagine. They put 1976 National Championships on.
I thought you were going to say maybe it had like pictures of Lou Henson and Gene Katie on it so that you could sit on them.
Yeah.
That would also be a great idea. I also have that set of trading cards that Jared showed, and I think I have another like 2-part set that was from I think Bank One is who put this out, but it was more like older. It was not just a given season. It was like a couple sets of those that I'm sure I have. I think I have in an old shoebox somewhere with other stuff like that.
That series is unique because they did a lot of guys on there that were not stars. They were just the guy who created the series, his name's escaping me at the moment, basically picked the story I was told. He's basically picked the players he liked the most over the years, and those are the ones that went on there. But there's some obscure players that you're like, who in the hell is that guy? You know, you've never seen or heard their name before, but yeah, that's a popular series too.
So, you know, wrapping up, do you have anything else that you want to get to? Any other great items that we should see before we start wrapping up?
I'll show you. I'll show you two more quick things.
Yeah.
One of them is this is a blotter schedule. Okay, 1928-29 season, and if you can tell in the background, this is the Indiana Fieldhouse. This is the fieldhouse that was going to be constructed and was going to be open for play in the 1928 season. And this is the only one I've ever seen. It's extremely rare. All these schedules that came out in the 20s and 30s were blotters because everybody used the old-fashioned ink pens. You had to blot your ink before you wrote on them. So most of them were trashed. But this one is in remarkable shape. It's the only one I've ever seen. And it's significant because it talks about the beginning of opening that field house. And what most people may not realize is that, you guys know who scored the first point in the field house? We've been talking about him tonight.
Branch.
Yeah. Scored the first point in the field house. And so, you know, I think of it as the house that Branch built because of his playing ability and obviously the 2 national championships that took place there. So.
By the way, whoever made that card, that schedule, was very proud of it because it's Indiana University's greatest basketball schedule with greatest in all caps. It's a very odd word to capitalize on.
There's nothing that even comes close to it. Yeah.
They're really proud of how they gamed the RPI that season, probably. So that was probably a factor, I would guess.
I'm sure there were some powerhouse teams. They played. Maybe Lafayette YMCA that year too.
Yeah, let's see the backlash if Tom Crean tries to call his schedule the greatest schedule ever.
That's right.
Ever.
Anything with Savannah State in it cannot be considered the greatest.
Yeah.
All right, last thing I want to show you is probably my favorite jersey. This one might be hard to figure out who it is.
Oh, it's not Damon, is it?
No.
Wait, Dean Garrett.
Nope. Go back. A very good player in the mid to late 70s, was a good role player on the 76 team.
Ah, dang it. I'm drawing a blank.
This is Wayne Radford.
Wayne Radford.
And this is his jersey from the 74-75 season. So in many ways, you know, if Scott May doesn't break his arm, it's a national championship season. But I was able to get this a few years ago, and it was actually one of the first jerseys I was ever able to purchase. And I wanted to have something from that era because I knew that, one, I probably would never be able to get a jersey from the 76 team, and probably wouldn't be able to afford one from that team, let alone hoping that they weren't out in private hands because those jerseys should be with IU. But this is the next best thing. It's a home jersey. It's extremely tight-fitting. I've not tried it on, trust me, but just the way it looks, you know, the way they wore the jersey so tight. But it's probably one of my favorite jerseys because of that era and that connection that it has.
Yeah. We have a request for any basketballs in your collection.
Basketballs. Well, my wife conveniently handed me this again, and I was going to show this to you guys.
Nice.
I've already done the story on it, but if anybody hasn't read the story, they should, because the story about these balls and the story about the people that are involved is pretty significant. I do have some signed balls. I have one from the 2013 Big Ten Championship season. I have one that is one of my favorites that I have put away right now, but that's from the 98-99 season, which I've posted before on Twitter. But the thing that's so significant about that is it has Knight has signed it. You know, it's the whole team, but it includes Luke Recker, and includes a guy that a lot of people didn't realize maybe didn't play basketball if you weren't familiar with basketball from that era, is Antoine Randall.
Yeah.
Who was a 3-sport athlete at IU, and what people don't realize is that he led the state of it. He had the all-time Illinois state assist record when he left high school for basketball.
Wow.
For a short period of time, and it was quickly broken. But he was a pretty darn good basketball player. in his own right. And I remember that season that he played, and I know he played just sparingly, but he was a heck of an athlete. I mean, he was a great baseball player, and obviously we know what he did on the football field. So.
Yeah. And one other question, too.
Sure.
Megan in our chat, who is related to one of the people who was on that 1940-1941 envelope that you posted. Is there any other backstory on the envelope? She said my aunt and I died a little when I shared that post. Bill and my grandpa made their L's identically.
Oh, I was able to get that in an auction, and it was something that I didn't realize the connection to Mr. Torfey at the time until that great film came out, Not Pictured. Which, if anybody has not seen that, you must see it. I added the link to it in the blog I wrote about the envelope. But we figured out that the person who received the envelope did the design on it, put the national champions on there, and put the logo, because that logo wasn't sticking out to me. And I actually contacted the archives, and they said, we don't have any record of that. So that's something that was homemade, done by. So basically, the individual who received it designed the envelope, hoping that they would sign it. And it was not common for people to sign back in those days, and let alone, honestly, if they were going to get signatures, they would have been for football players and not basketball, because basketball was still second fiddle to football at that time. But I think it just brings together so many important things. The one key signature that is missing is Bob Droe, who was on that team, who was such a key part of that 40 team. And what's interesting is, if you don't notice, there's a space right underneath McCracken's name, and I think it's a lot of. To me, my theory is that the players were too, intimidated to sign right beneath the coach, so they left the space to kind of give him his noteworthy moment and kind of honor him, because he was Branch McCracken. So.
Yeah. One last question for you from the chat. Do you rotate your items into your house in storage? Is it hard to keep track of everything?
Well, I don't have what I have behind me is, for the most part, what I have in my house right now, because I just don't have a big area to display it. So I have one case that I put stuff in, but I do try to kind of change things out. But I'm hoping that eventually I'll be able to get the IU room that I envision, so that I can see things and have things displayed in prominent places. But I try to mix it up. Most of the stuff I have in the case is IU basketball right now, but I try to have some area for football. And I'm trying to post more this fall about football, because we are in football season, and then we'll post more about basketball during basketball season. But I just have a little bit of everything. I have probably over 800 items, and honestly, that's not a lot compared to some other people I know that have thousands of IU items. So I just have a little bit of everything.
So, you have a lot of this old stuff, and obviously the older stuff is harder to get a hold of. So as you move forward now, what kind of stuff do you save now? Like from, this last basketball season, how do you kind of figure out what's worth saving?
I've always tried to keep every ticket I've gone to a game of, and I have a huge box, and I try to, the important ones that I've been to. I have what's called a Riker mount display case, and I have the first ticket to the first game at Assembly Hall, and I have the IU Michigan game from home a few years ago. Obviously the watch shot game, which, the disclaimer, I did not attend, so it's kind of weird for me to display the ticket of the game that I didn't actually go to. But that's neither here nor there. But I try to keep every ticket stub. I don't buy programs at the games. They're really bulky. They're not as simple as they used to be. But I did have them from some of the more prominent games, home games this year. But my biggest thing these days is schedules and tickets. I'm trying to keep a run. From 1950 to the present, I'm only missing 3 schedules.
Wow.
Period. And 2 are from the 60s and 1 are from the 50s. That's it.
It's amazing.
So, yeah.
That's great, man. This has been incredibly fun. I feel like we could do, an episode like this every month, and you could just take us through more stuff. It's so much fun. And I know, just looking at the comments in the chat, people have really enjoyed this, and I'm sure people will, listening on the podcast and watching the video too. It's been phenomenal. We appreciate you sharing your time and sharing all your items with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
What are you kind of final question to lead us out here? as you look forward to next year's team, and obviously you do this because you're a big fan of the team. What are you looking to for both the football team and the basketball team this year?
Football, I'm looking for improvement on defense. I think Coach Allen, the defensive coach, is the guy that everybody wants at IU, and that's not a disrespect to the previous defensive coaches under Wilson's era, but he's an Indiana guy. He'll recruit Indiana. I think that his scheme will work, hopefully, but I think the biggest question mark to me is the quarterback position. How we're going to replace Nate Sudfeld. I always try to be an optimist when it comes to IU football. I mean, I'll be at every game. I just hope that we can build on, reaching a bowl game and getting screwed out of winning a bowl game. The kick was good, yes. So that's my biggest thing there. And basketball, I'm extremely excited. I'm extremely nervous. I think our front court is going to be as good as it's been in a long time. I can't recall the last time we've had two prominent big men. I think I'm really looking forward to see what Newkirk's going to do at the point. If Robert Johnson's going to handle the ball some, I think he's going to have to. But I'm anxious to see what Blackman does coming back. I'm hoping that he can provide some spark offensively and, I hate to say it, but is not a defensive liability. And really, the biggest thing is I'm looking to see OG continue to mature. I mean, the guy is so humble and is so exciting to watch that, to be honest, I didn't expect the 127th or whatever player rated in the country to do what he did, especially on the stage as he did against Kentucky. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm excited. My wife and I have season tickets for football and basketball, so that's our passion, is to go to the games. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Andy, any final thoughts?
I would if I would turn the mute off. Just wanted to thank Chris for coming. This was really cool. I think, like Jared said, we could probably sit and do this for hours each week and do that. So definitely cool and excited for the football season to start on Thursday. I have I think I've mentioned this before. I mean, we had season football tickets for probably close to 30 years. I think when I was growing up, our first year was the first year of the Mallory era. So despite some probably more than my fair share of disappointment along the way, have do like the IU football team with the same passion that I do the basketball side. So excited for the season to start, and hopefully some of those questions, particularly at the quarterback, start to get answered on Thursday, and hopefully in a positive way. But definitely optimistic about that, and it'll help us get time moving and get the season started in basketball, because the schedule's coming out and all those things are coming up. So it's getting close enough, even though it still felt like 100 degrees here in Cincinnati for the last week. But basketball season will be here before we know it.
Hey, at least you started off well as a football fan. I mean, if you started for the Mallory era, you kind of just started to expect bowl games as like a regular thing.
We did, except the first year we had season tickets was his first year when they didn't win a game. But other than that, after that, it got
That's true. But
it did get markedly better.
Yes.
It did get markedly better. So exactly, I have a lot of fond memories of those teams. That's why I brought it up tonight. Those are always some of my favorites.
Yeah, from 0-11 to the high water mark of ranked 7th in the country in 1987 before kind of a tough finish to the season. But yes, alas, we will sign off for the night. But again, a reminder, if you've been listening to the podcast and you haven't had a chance to watch the video yet, the show notes and the video are at assemblycall.com/artifactshow. Artifact Show, or you can always go to our YouTube channel. Go to assemblycall.com/YouTube. That will redirect you to our YouTube channel. You can find the video there. Subscribe to the Assembly Call on YouTube so that whenever we go live, you get an alert. And also be on the lookout for future posts from Chris in the IU Artifact series that we're doing on the Assembly Call. Those can all be found at assemblycall.com/IU-artifacts. And, of course, follow Chris on Twitter at IU Artifacts. It is just always a blast seeing what he tweets out, seeing the great items, many of which you saw today, and obviously there are hundreds and hundreds more that he has that you'll be able to check out as well. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you being here live, and we will be back in a couple of weeks with another brand new episode. It's time to start breaking down the season, looking at the schedule, start to preview what should be a fun season of IU basketball. So we hope you'll join us on future episodes of the Assembly Call. And until then, be safe, cheer on the football Hoosiers, and we will talk to you soon.